This old invitation, it speaks of vows. Vows he shattered at the altar, for all the world to see. He told me he'd found someone better, a more strategic alliance for his father's vast empire. He saw a jilted bride. He never saw the quiet architect of his family's fortune, or the precise hand that could dismantle it all with a single overlooked clause. My tears were silent that day. My plan? Far from it. And the consequences for him were anything but small. This little thing, it still sparkles, doesn't it? Deceptively so, much like the man who gave it to me, Julian Vance III. He was all charm and old money, heir to the Grand Vance Global Consolidated. Back then, I suppose our family, the Reynolds of Reynolds Precision Parts, seemed rather quaint in comparison. My father, Arthur, built our company on grit and genuine innovation, not on generations of inherited wealth. He believed in making things that lasted, things of quality, and he believed in me. He'd often joke that I had a better head for international markets than any seasoned executive he knew. Perhaps he was just a proud father, but I did pour my heart into learning the intricacies of our supply chain, especially sourcing those specialized components from far-flung corners of the world. It was the 1960s, mind you. Global trade wasn't a matter of instant emails and video calls. It was telexes clattering in the dead of night, painstaking translations, and building trust across thousands of miles with nothing but your word and the clarity of your contracts. I loved that challenge. I relished negotiating terms, ensuring every detail protected our interests, our innovations. We were on the cusp of launching a new product line then, something revolutionary for its time. Built around a rare mineral I'd spent months securing an exclusive supply for. It was to be the future of Reynolds Precision Parts, a testament to my father's vision and I'd hoped, my growing contribution to it. Julian knew all about it, of course. He seemed so interested, so supportive. Our courtship felt like something out of a storybook. Dinners, dances, whispered promises under starry skies. He was attentive, handsome, and his family, well, the Vances were a force. They'd even expressed a polite, almost casual interest in a strategic partnership with Reynolds Precision Parts. My father was cautious. He saw the gleam in Julian Vance Sr.'s eye that spoke more of acquisition than alliance. But I, blinded by love, believed Julian was different. I believed our future was a shared dream, not a corporate strategy. The wedding was to be the event of the season. St. Michael's Cathedral, a guest list that read like a who's who of the city's elite. My dress, a cascade of silk and lace, hung waiting. Every detail was meticulously planned, every expectation soaring. I was young, hopeful, and deeply in love with a man I thought felt the same. I truly believed he respected my mind, my work with my father, even if his world was so much larger, so much louder than mine. Looking back, the signs were there, subtle as they were. The way Julian would subtly steer conversations away from the nitty-gritty of our business, his easy dismissal of my more complex ideas as sweet endeavors. He saw my diligence, I think, but he mistook it for simple dutifulness, not ambition or keen intellect. A common mistake, then and now, when looking at a woman in a man's world. He saw a future wife, a pretty ornament for the Vance dynasty. He never truly saw me. My father, bless his heart, saw more. He'd often say, "Eliza, your quiet strength, your eye for detail. That's your armor and your sharpest tool. Never let anyone underestimate that." He knew, even if I didn't fully grasp it then, that true power wasn't always in the grand pronouncements or the boardroom battles. Sometimes it was in the knowledge carefully gathered, the relationships painstakingly built, the foresight to protect what was yours. And so, the stage was set, not just for a wedding, but for a lesson in underestimation that would echo through decades. A lesson Julian Vance III and his entire formidable family were about to learn in the most public and devastating way possible. They saw a bride, eager and perhaps a little overwhelmed. They never suspected they were dealing with someone who understood the delicate mechanics of their world far better than they imagined. The preparations continued, a whirlwind of flowers, fittings, and societal expectations. I floated through it, blissfully unaware that the man I was about to pledge my life to was merely seeing our union as a stepping stone. A convenient, temporary bridge to what he truly coveted: my father's innovation, his company, his legacy. He thought my heart, and by extension our business, was his for the taking. It's amusing, in a wry sort of way, how often the most significant battles are fought not on grand fields, but in the quiet calculations of an underestimated mind. My father always said, the loudest man in the room is often the one with the least to say of substance. Julian was loud in his charm, his confidence, his entitlement. I was listening. Do you believe quiet strength is often underestimated? Share your thoughts below. And then, the day arrived. St. Michael's, a sea of expectant faces, the scent of lilies heavy in the air. I felt like I was floating, every nerve ending alive with anticipation. My father squeezed my hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. Julian reached the altar, handsome as ever, but there was something off. A flicker in his eyes I hadn't seen before, a tension around his perfectly sculpted jaw. He took my hands, his own surprisingly cold. The music softened. The officiant began the traditional opening words. And then, as he was about to prompt us for our vows, Julian leaned in close, his voice a low, chilling whisper meant only for me, yet a pronouncement that would echo through my entire life. Eliza, he murmured, his breath smelling faintly of expensive cologne and something else, something bitter. I can't do this. I'm truly sorry, but it's impossible. My heart, which had been soaring, plummeted. I remember the scent of the lilies suddenly becoming cloying, suffocating. I could only stare at him, trying to process his words. I've found someone better, he continued, his gaze not quite meeting mine, a coward even in his cruelty. Someone more suitable for the Vance legacy. Isabella Dumont. Her family offers a more advantageous alliance. He had the audacity to sound almost businesslike, as if he were discussing a merger that had fallen through, not the shattering of a life, a heart. He even added, his voice barely a breath, your father's company, it's admirable of course. But, well, you understand, the implication was clear. We were small, insignificant in the grand scheme of his ambitions. The Vances were aligning with European banking royalty. Reynolds' precision parts, my father's lifeblood, my quiet pride, was suddenly relegated to a footnote in his grand, callous design. A wave of stunned silence rippled through the first few pews as those closest perhaps sensed the shift, the sudden icy dread. My father's hand tightened on my arm, his knuckles white. I could feel the tremor of his fury, the protective roar he was struggling to contain. For a moment, I thought he might strike Julian, right there at the altar. The public humiliation was a searing brand, not just on me, but on my family, on the name Reynolds. To be jilted so publicly, so cruelly, with the city's elite as witnesses, it was a calculated act of social annihilation. But then, something inside me, a core of cold, hard steel I hadn't known I possessed, solidified. The initial shock, the tidal wave of pain, receded just enough. I looked at Julian, truly looked at him, at his perfectly tailored suit, his handsome, now slightly sweating face, the almost bored arrogance in his eyes as he delivered this devastating blow. And I saw him for what he was, a shallow, manipulative boy playing at being a man, a corporate raider in a groom's tuxedo. He expected tears. He probably anticipated a scene, a hysterical bride, a fainting spell. It would have fed his narrative, perhaps the overly emotional, jilted girl. Instead, I lifted my chin. I met his gaze directly, my own suddenly clear, unclouded by foolish love. And with a calmness that seemed to unnerve him more than any outburst could have, I simply said, understood, Julian, just that one word. Then, I gave a single, deliberate nod. There was no tremor in my voice, no hint of the earthquake raging within me. I saw a flicker of surprise, perhaps even disappointment, in his eyes. This wasn't the script he'd written. I then turned, not with haste, but with a measured dignity I didn't know I could summon, took my father's arm, and together, we walked back down that long, silent aisle, past the stunned faces, the whispered gasps, the dawning horror. The organist, bless his confused soul, faltered, then fell silent. The only sound was the rustle of my gown and the steady click of my heels on the marble floor, a sound that, in my memory, became the ticking clock of his eventual downfall. My father's grip was iron, a silent promise of support, of fury, held in check only for my sake. He didn't say a word until we reached the heavy oak doors of the cathedral. He thought my silence was shock, perhaps surrender. He never fathomed it was the quiet gathering of a storm, the drawing of a battle line he hadn't even realized existed. He had played his hand believing he held all the cards. The betrayal cut deep, the humiliation was a bitter pill, but they had no idea what I, Eliza Reynolds, was truly capable of. Keep watching Revenge with Alex to see how the tables turned. The days that followed were a blur of hushed phone calls, canceled caterers, and the suffocating weight of public pity. But beneath the surface of my composure, my mind was racing. Julian's betrayal wasn't just a personal wound. It was a calculated business maneuver. The Vances, with their predatory instincts, had long circled Reynolds' precision parts. Julian's marriage to me, I now sickeningly realized, was likely intended as the first step in a hostile, or at least deeply unfavorable, takeover. His sudden alliance with Isabella Dumont and her family's banking empire only confirmed that they were consolidating power, and my father's company was likely next on their acquisition list. Weakened and shamed as we were, my father, Arthur, was a lion caged. He spoke of lawsuits, of public denouncements. But I knew the Vances, with their deep pockets and armies of lawyers, would tie us up in court for years, bleeding us dry. No, direct confrontation wasn't the way. They expected us to react emotionally, predictably. They expected us to be broken. I, however, was beginning to see another path, a quieter, more intricate one, paved with the very details they had so arrogantly overlooked. I retreated into the familiar comfort of my work, into the heart of Reynolds' precision parts. While the city buzzed with gossip about the jilted bride, I was poring over contracts, supplier agreements, and correspondence, specifically every interaction we'd ever had with Vance Global. Julian, in his courtship, had shown an almost unsettling interest in our new product line, the one dependent on that rare earth mineral. He'd asked leading questions, feigning a layman's curiosity about our sourcing, our exclusive agreements. At the time, I'd seen it as supportive. Now, I saw it as espionage. The key, I felt, lay with that sole source supplier in a small, rather politically unstable West African nation. I had personally spent weeks, no, months, cultivating that relationship. Their government was new, wary of foreign exploitation. Building trust had been paramount. I remembered the late-night telexes, the careful navigation of cultural nuances, the insistence on certain clauses in our agreement that their initial representative had dismissed as unnecessary American formalities. One such clause, a key personnel stipulation, had been my own addition. It stated, quite clearly, that if I, Eliza Reynolds, due to my established rapport and direct involvement in securing the initial terms, was no longer the primary liaison for Reynolds Precision Parts managing their account, the supplier reserved the right to immediately review and potentially terminate or renegotiate the entire exclusive supply contract. It was a safeguard, born of a young woman's meticulousness and a desire to protect her father's investment in a volatile region. Julian Vance III, in his infinite arrogance, would never have known of its existence, let alone its potential power. He wouldn't have bothered with such minor details of a minor company's minor supplier. My father and I sat in his study late one night, the scent of his pipe tobacco a familiar comfort. I laid out my findings, my dawning strategy. They want our supplier, father, I said, my voice quiet but firm. They tried to get it through me, then by attempting to destabilize us enough to force a cheap sale. Julian's actions were a part of that. Arthur listened, his initial rage slowly giving way to a grim understanding, then a flicker of something else, pride. He saw the steel beneath my grief. The plan was deceptively simple, relying entirely on the Vances' underestimation of us and their ignorance of that critical clause. First, I would formally, and very discreetly, resign from my specific duties related to the West African supplier account. My reason would be personal, following recent distressing events, an explanation no one could question. Second, Arthur would then, as per our contractual obligations, formally notify the supplier of this change, expressing deep regret but emphasizing our need to respect my personal decision. Then, we would wait. It was a gamble, of course. The supplier could choose to do nothing, but given the fragile trust we had built, and the specific wording I had insisted upon, I felt confident they would react. The Vances, meanwhile, would be oblivious, likely proceeding with their plans to either strong-arm Reynolds Precision Parts or make a move on the supplier themselves, assuming our internal turmoil had left us vulnerable. Their hubris would be their undoing. The necessary letters were drafted with excruciating care, the language formal, devoid of emotion, sent via registered airmail and confirmed by telex, the height of international business communication in that era. There was a strange, cold satisfaction in the precision of it, a counterpoint to the messy, emotional wreckage Julian had left behind. Each stamp, each signature, felt like a small, deliberate step on a long, calculated path. My patience was a tightly coiled spring. Every day I expected a call, a move from the Vances, but they remained silent, likely believing they had already won, that I was a shattered, irrelevant pawn. Little did they know the seeds of their unraveling had already crossed the Atlantic, carried in a simple linen envelope. If you enjoy seeing clever strategy overcome injustice, make sure you subscribe to Revenge with Alex. The first tremor from across the ocean arrived via a terse telex to my father's office. Our West African supplier acknowledged receipt of his letter regarding my change in status. They expressed profound concern, citing my invaluable role in fostering initial trust and navigating complex contractual specificities. Then came the critical line: "We are therefore invoking Clause 7b of our agreement and will be undertaking an immediate review of all supply terms and pricing." My father and I exchanged a look. The bait was taken. The Vances, of course, knew nothing of this quiet, internal communication. They were too busy, I later learned, preparing their magnanimous rock-bottom offer to acquire a distressed Reynolds Precision Parts. Weeks later, as Julian Vance Seoster was likely rehearsing his condescending takeover speech, the bombshell truly landed. A formal, non-negotiable communication arrived from our supplier. Due to the severance of the key personnel relationship with me, they were exercising their contractual right. They weren't terminating the contract outright, oh no, that would have been too simple. Instead, they were increasing the price of the rare earth mineral by an astonishing 500%, effective immediately, citing increased political risk, the loss of established trusted liaison, and revised market value. It was a masterstroke of contractual obligation, delivered with devastating politeness. This mineral, remember, was the absolute cornerstone of the revolutionary new product line that both Reynolds Precision Parts and Vance Global Consolidated were desperately trying to bring to market. Without it at a viable cost, the entire venture was financially untenable. The Vances had been banking on securing our supply chain, either through acquiring us cheaply or by leveraging their corporate might to intimidate the supplier after what they assumed would be our collapse. They had no alternative source. I had made sure our exclusivity was ironclad for the initial term. The panic that erupted within Vance Global was, I'm told, legendary. Their R&D on the competing product lines screeched to a halt. Their projected profits vanished overnight. Julian Vance Seoster, a man accustomed to bullying his way to success, found himself utterly checkmated by a clause in a contract he'd never even bothered to know existed, a clause penned by a young woman his son had publicly humiliated and dismissed. The irony was almost too delicious. He called my father Arthur, not with an offer, but with a demand, then a plea. I was present for that final, desperate meeting in my father's study. Julian Seoster and Julian III, a shadow of his former arrogant self, sat opposite us. Arthur, Vance Seoster, blustered then deflated. You must do something. This supplier, Eliza, can't she just talk to them? My father let the silence hang for a moment before he spoke, his voice calm but edged with ice. Gentlemen, he said, looking directly at Julian III, when your son chose to publicly sever his ties with my daughter in the most brutal fashion, he wasn't just breaking a vow. He was severing a crucial, legally binding business relationship. That key person clause, the one that guaranteed supply stability, that was Eliza's foresight. She understood the value of personal trust in these delicate international dealings. A nuance, it seems, your vast corporation overlooked. The color drained from their faces. The full weight of their miscalculation, of Julian's catastrophic personal decision impacting their entire corporate strategy, finally hit them. Julian III couldn't meet my eye. He just stared at his hands, a broken man who had sacrificed genuine affection and a sound business future for fleeting arrogance and a fandom alliance with Isabella Dumont, an alliance, I later heard, that quickly dissolved when the Dumonts realized the Vances were teetering on the brink of financial ruin. The downfall of Vance Global Consolidated was swift and brutal. Their stock plummeted. They were forced into massive layoffs, selling off divisions to stay afloat. Eventually, they were acquired by a larger, more stable entity for a fraction of their former worth. The Vance name, once a titan of industry, became a cautionary tale. Julian III faded into obscurity, his someone better long gone, his inheritance a pittance. He had tried to bankrupt my father's spirit and my heart. Instead, he and his father had bankrupted their own legacy. Reynolds' precision parts weathered the storm. We had to adapt, of course, find alternatives. But we survived, leaner, stronger, and with our integrity intact. I never saw Julian again after that meeting. There was no need. Justice hadn't been a loud, vengeful cry. It had been the quiet, inevitable click of contractual obligations falling precisely into place, triggered by his own hand, and so, that chapter closed. My father's company thrived for many more years, eventually passing to capable hands when he retired. I found my own happiness, my own peace, built on foundations far stronger than Julian Vance could ever comprehend. He sought a strategic alliance through marriage. I found my strength in strategy born of integrity. He underestimated a woman's mind, a father's love, and the enduring power of a well-crafted sentence in a forgotten contract. Some might say revenge is a dish best served cold. I prefer to think of it as justice, meticulously prepared, and served at precisely the right temperature. It took patience, it took resolve, but in the end, the scales balanced. They always do, if you're willing to play the long game. Did this story of long game justice resonate with you? Hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to see it. Loved this story? Tell us what city you're watching Revenge with Alex from in the comments below.